Yes, so we have a time to entertain questions or to be entertained by the questions. Some mixture of the two. And Subhash, you beat us to it, so go ahead.
Okay, and just a reminder so that people who are streaming it now or streaming the archive later, please use the mic when you're asking your questions.
My question is on defilements. So, Lama Michael, I was reading something this week and then I did some investigation and I thought I'll ask you about it. So, the one way to look at the entire Buddhist path is get rid of defilements, right? Eliminate defilements. So, when I think about defilements, I use two references for myself. One of them comes from the Pali Canon, and the other one is something that you have taught in the past, which are the two obscurations. Okay. Now, when I look at the Pali Canon, there's the Majjhima Nikaya number 7. It talks about 16 defilements. And the 16 defilements are, your standard type, right? Attraction, aversion.
I'm intimate with them.
And pardon me, what did you say? What did you say?
He said I'm
Oh, he's intimate with him. Yeah, I know. So.
I don't know their names, though.
So. It's so. That's fair. Now, what's interesting is that we often say, the 5 poisons, right? And I think that part of it is, I like that. It's straight and simple. But when I started looking at the teachings a little bit more, it got more nuanced, especially when I was reading.
It got what?
More nuanced.
Oh, more nuanced, yeah.
Okay. So firstly, when you look at the teachings in the canon, okay, they take the 16 defilements and say, if you are a stream enterer, you have eliminated these 6. If you're a non-returner, you have eliminated these 4. And if you're on the path of arhatship, you have eliminated the remaining 6. Okay. And so that's their view of it. But then this week, what triggered this whole thing in my mind was, I was reading Sakya Trinzen's book. And in that, he talks about the 2 obscurations. And he says, the obscuration of defilements and the obscuration of knowledge. And he says, well, the obscuration of defilements, once you have eliminated the defilements, that takes you only up to personal liberation. But if you want to go all the way up to Buddhahood, you have to get rid of the obscuration of knowledge. So he actually took it a step even beyond what I had read in the canon. Okay? And he didn't dive into all of the 16, okay? But, so, that's the background. Now, here's my question. My question is that the one that troubles me most, when I think of defilements, I say, well, okay, these are the poisons, okay? And so I leave it at that, and so be it, I'm happy. However, whenever you have talked about obscurations in the past, there's the part of it about obscuration of knowledge that actually I don't really understand. Can you speak to that? I understand defilements. So all of these defilements are there. Okay, they are in my mind and I see it. But obscuration of knowledge, is that really getting into ignorance? Is that, is that the piece? What is the obscuration of that is being eliminated at that stage? Because obscuration of knowledge, if you tell me to obscure knowledge, well, then I can't do, surgery, or I can't design a computer chip. I mean, what does it really mean?
You might be surprised what you can do and can't do. Listening to your erudition on the defilements, the key thing that strikes me is that you have thoroughgoing understanding of some material, but it's highly conceptual. And at that level of the conceptual understanding, we could go on about the conceptual end of it more or less endlessly. Some people do. Some groups do. It's like you might say there's defilement clubs, or just Dharma groups that get together and talk about these things, and defilements come up. We're really, in a nutshell, I don't want to say too much about it, lest you see my defilements. The issue here is manifold. It's like there's many aspects to it. So, from my own perspective, because I have so many of these things, my inclination is to understand them in a summary form, and also, even much more importantly, in an experiential form. Because that's really the issue. The experiential piece, when we're not aware of what our obstacles are on the path, then they block us. So that awareness could be, to some degree, the awareness itself could be triggered a little bit by a conceptual understanding. Just like we get a little conceptual instruction about the meditation, and then the objective is to go into the experience of the meditation. So there's nothing wrong with blowing off the experience and doing a big thing on the conceptual, but ultimately you have to come back to the experience. And when we talk about defilements, we can enumerate those also, which they have been, as you so eloquently pointed out, in many texts, in many traditions, kind of grandly elaborated. We still have to come back to the experience at some point. Even with profoundly perfect conceptual understanding, that may not free us from the actual obstacle. And so we could summarize, of the many, probably hundreds of ways that it could be summarized, we could say the real issue here is, and let me just take the obscuration of knowledge, which is a kind of, it tickles me. Let me put it that way. The obscuration of knowledge feels like it should be an oxymoron, like you have knowledge, what's the problem with that? And in a nutshell, the problem can be brought down to the simple understanding that when you know one thing, that one thing you know may or may not be accurate. In either case, it may not be possible to know something else by virtue of knowing that thing. We do that all the time, right? It's like if it's cold outside, we put a jacket on and we go outside and we come in here and we think when we're going to go outside again, well, it's going to be cold, but then it isn't, the weather's changed. And we have trouble reconciling often the things that we think we know when we find out that actually what we thought we knew isn't true. Sometimes we don't want to let go of what we've discovered, and so we continue to hold that the new thing, which feels to us like it must be better, we hold that as true. And then it takes a long time to get rid of that, or to change that, or to replace it with something more nuanced, because we already have an opinion about this piece. All of those things, I think, are useful in the context of our Dharma practice by recognizing how those things work. So for me, the specific obscuration or the specific defilement is not nearly as interesting as my own experience of whatever defilement is arising in this moment. That's the one that I want to look at. It reminds me of when I asked my dentist, which toothbrush should I use? And she says, the one you use. And so I feel like, in a way, this is really where we are with it. We need to work with the things that stand in the way of our practice and our understanding of the Dharma. That's for sure. And each one of us has got a different set of obstacles and obscurations and misunderstandings and wrong views. All these things are there. But it's not my experience that in trying to work with them in a kind of organized way is helpful. That's just my experience. I don't find it helpful. I find myself like wandering through a maze of things that are not connecting to my experience, which means that at the end of the day, when I sit down, what caused me confusion and unhappiness the day before is still there, happy to keep doing that. Whereas, if I can bring my awareness to something that feels like an impediment of some kind, it's usually not very complicated. It's usually not very complicated. So I can have the experience, often joyfully, that I went into this particular habit that I have that looks like it's causing some difficulty in just an ordinary way, without any of the technical stuff. I look at it, bring my awareness to it in the context of the Shine meditation, and just rest the awareness on that for a short time. And in a short time, I can witness the awareness sees the experience. And in a short time, the experience itself, like all experiences do, it vanishes. It's just not there anymore. And usually, I don't see it go. I don't see it leave the room, sort of. It's just gone. One of the early Karmapas explained that phenomena as, in essence, in the moment that we witnessed that we had our awareness on a particular experience and that particular experience was no longer there, what we have witnessed, first conceptually, to understand that that's possible because of the nature of emptiness. So we often befuddle ourselves with the word emptiness, which can be talked a lot about, but not so easy to recognize the experience of it. But every time that we place our awareness and our meditation on something, and that thing changes, it's capable of changing because of the inherent nature of that emptiness. So I would replace my own personal preference. I'm not recommending it because I think that the conceptual is actually can be very helpful, but it cannot replace the experience. The experience is what it is, and that's really where the big juice is. So I think the conceptual piece is fine, and you should follow it in whatever way you want. But really what we're talking about is, what is my experience of the practice of the Dharma? How do I go deeper into it experientially? How do I overcome the obstacles that, almost without exception, I put in way of myself? Nobody else has to do it for me. I seem to be really quite adept at that. And the most profound antidote that I've found is, in the context of the meditation, bring your awareness to that very obstacle. If you can recognize the obstacle, the rest of it should be really easy. Easy when we're willing to do it, but often we love that obstacle. We identify with that obstacle, and we will not let go of it, no matter how many times we have insight into the nature of emptiness. So that's a very personal thing. No one can do that for you. You got to do it yourself. And the instructions for doing it are robust, deep, profound, and innumerable. So we shouldn't have to look too far to find a workable instruction for it. Just finally to say, I'm completely, thoroughly aware that I did not answer your question.
That's okay.
And I'll confess that that happened with no awareness on my part.
So, Michael, I think you've already halfway answered my question.
It's Sally.
The disembodied voice from the ceiling. I'm wrestling with a difficult situation on an experiential level. I got into a conflict with an employee, which then turned into a conflict.
Can you speak just a little louder?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I got into a conflict with an employee, and then as a result of that, it became a conflict with my business partner as well. And it's been going on for some time, and we've been trying to resolve it and not having much luck doing that. And so I find myself having this very layered emotional experience around it. At an intensity level that I feel sort of stupid now, like my brain doesn't quite work right anymore because this thing has so much heat
I'm
to
intimate
it.
with that too.
Yeah,
So
I
go
figured.
ahead.
This is why I'm asking. You know, and it makes me realize there are a lot of situations in my life where when something feels too intense to work with, I can actually walk away. Like I can do my best, and then if I can't get anywhere with it, I can just say, okay, I don't have the skill for this. I'm going to step back from this for now. But this is one of those situations where I can't step away. Like, I need to go there every day.
Yeah.
And it's just the three of us.
You're lucky.
And so, so I'm trying to find a way to relate to this as an opportunity and not as the complete torment that it feels like on a
Yes.
day-to-day basis. And I hear what you're saying about just take that experience as the object, but bring awareness to it and watch what happens. And I'm trying to do that. But it still mostly feels overwhelming, and I feel carried away by it. And it feels like more than I can work with. So I'm looking for some advice or some guidance about what to do. I feel a little like it must be sometimes for the folks in 3-year retreat, like you can't just open the door and walk away.
Oh, you sure
You're stuck there. If there's a conflict, you got to deal with it. It feels a little like that, like I can't walk away. So how do I do something that feels like it's more than I know how to do?
Yeah. That's good. There's a number of ways that we can approach this from a skillful means. First of all, we have what we've been talking about, placing our awareness on an experience. So, I want to commend you for raising a difficult situation in a public place, which means that everybody can get something from it, but I also acknowledge that it's not always comfortable. So it might be that you want to continue it at some point in another conversation. But let's say this. There's a kind of terrifying teaching, to put just a very slight spin of hyperbole on it, where the teaching is that if you have a teacher and the teacher is, your relationship is of such a magnitude that you basically can do almost anything that person asks, then when they bring you really difficult things, you have this practice of receiving them as if they were, a gift. Always a gift, always a gift, always a gift, like that. And some of them are joyful beyond imagine, and others make you want to feel like just jumping off a bridge. But it's always the issue of the gift always brings you an experience which you cannot deny. And that's what makes it the gift. Since you cannot deny it, you must work with it. If you could deny it, you wouldn't work with it. Because that is the preferred approach. From time to time, I've been pretty much professional at that. Skate on all difficult things. But here we have a slightly different understanding. And the understanding here, if we come at it conceptually first and then look at it experientially, we'll see something. First of all, you have a situation that you feel like you cannot easily get out with, or if you could, the sacrifice is at least currently unacceptable. So you're really stuck. And the good thing is that you have the tools to work with. So that's the important piece. If you're really stuck and you don't have the tools, then it's really awful for everybody, because it's like the smelly thing in the middle of the room and nobody knows where it's coming from or what to do about it. But in this case, we often talk about horrific obstacles in the Dharma, especially in this group of teachings and the methods that we talk about it within the context of the Vajrayana in Tibetan Buddhism, we imagine horrific things. People and deities in the midst of flames and all, and these things often represent exactly what we're talking about. Like, it's so intense that it's burning you up. And so what are you going to do in the midst of that? You can't put the flames out. You're just there. So if there is a means, and we have the means, if there is a means to bring our awareness to the power of that situation, then we have a grand possibility. And the power of that situation is important because, for example, you have an itch on your nose. That is so easy to deal with. And it's gone. So, no insight, right? It's like you don't get much for it. The itch is gone. It wasn't much anyway. It would have gone away in another 3 seconds. Who cares? We need to have, in order to make the large leaps, we need to have some power. We need to have some, whatever you want to call it, power, energy, unavoidableness of some kind, something that really brings some energy into it for us, so that when we place our awareness on the experience of the inevitable, which is like, I can't see how to do this thing, when you feel it, when you say that, that's a conceptual thing, then you put your awareness on the thing which feels like it cannot be, cannot work. It's just untenable from every angle, and yet it's a really strong experience. It's tenable from that perspective. So you need to put your awareness on this thing, wind yourself up, and bring your awareness to that experience. You place your awareness on that experience. Sometimes we can have a sound. In one text, it even says that when the energy and that experience comes together, it says there's a sound that happens. Just the other day I was reading this thing again. For the first time I thought, God, I wonder what that sounds like. Thunk. What is it? What exactly is it? But something, it's. I think that in the context it was really just like we do so much in the Vajrayana, we imagine things. So it actually could be that there's like, hear the sound of the two coming together. It could be that kind of an instruction. Like, you're bringing your awareness to something that you don't want to bring your awareness to. You want to bring something that just annihilates it and gets rid of it. So instead of that, we're putting our awareness on this thing, and it's so intense that we hear a sound of the two of them coming together. But really what it is that we have to put our awareness there. And there is a way that it magnetizes. We have that experience. We are intent on using it. And if you do this a number of times, it really is like not so hard to get the intent, because as soon as that energy is gone, it's sort of like the magnetism is gone. When it's really at its peak, you bring your awareness there and it just connects. And you have the experience, which could be like sweating, your body's shaking, all sorts of things. But of course, what's really happening is you're mixing all sorts of what-ifs into the middle of it too. The more you put in there, the more the fire burns. But you also know there's no fire here. It's like, I'm not going to burn up. This is really just the energy that's required in order to deal with what is otherwise a situation that I would gladly walk away from and never see again. So this is where that instruction of when the guru brings you the gift. You cannot turn it away. That's just a piece of the commitment that what comes we work with. When your mind is resting on that very difficult situation, in the moment of that resting there, it can feel like it's okay. And because we always say that the appearance, which is the situation that we're dealing with, right? We have this thing. Conceptually, we can see it, and when we put our awareness on it, we can have the experience of it. This is all in the realm of what we could say the appearance. But also, that thing doesn't stay there. We put our awareness there, we just hold it there for a while, and interestingly, once it's there, it tends to stick. The awareness sticks there because there's some sense that this is the resolution. There's a sense of that. This is the resolution, so that it sticks there. And then we could even have a sense of joy. Like, yeah. And then suddenly we notice it's gone. And then we have another appearance, which could be summarized as, damn. It's just gone. That then, when we say, damn, we're basically not having the experience that was right there, ready to be had, which is the union of the appearance and the emptiness. It goes because it never was what it appeared to be. The emptiness that we, bandy about is really just the potential to arrive and go, appear and disappear. Because it's here now doesn't mean it'll be here in the next second. The fact that it's gone now doesn't mean it won't be back. And so that union of the emptiness, the potential to be there, to be small, to be big, to be the source of insight, to be the source of confusion, to be the source of clarity, all of that is there in that thing. So you can't put your awareness on it and not have that experience if you stop talking to yourself about it while your awareness is resting there. It just is natural. So we start with things that are not too big usually. But it's my experience, actually, that the big ones are really where the benefit is. If we're willing to just use that as the object of our meditation, without any intention, without any ulterior motive, like I'll get insight out of this, or I'll resolve the relationship, or whatever. No, more like no matter what happens, this is the thing to do, that kind of approach. And so every time that I'm walking around and I remember this, or I'm in a car, or I'm having lunch and I remember it, then we just develop this habit. We just keep bringing the awareness to it each time. And the interesting thing is that sometimes when we talk about shamatha, we want to place our awareness on something. And it feels to us like trying to balance a marble on top of another marble. Yeah, I can put the marble on top of the other marble, and I have stability for like a fraction of a second, and then it's gone. But when you place your awareness on an intense experience, it's like two magnets. It's really easy to just have them there. And once you've done that a few times and you feel the idea of it being unsafe is ludicrous. Nobody knows you're doing it. Nobody ever has to know that you did it. And so it has this thing of, it's like my gold, my gift. It's the gift to me. And the gift to me is not the trouble. It's that I had this tool now for many years, and suddenly I figured out how to use it. When the feeling of angst, which has to be connected with what you're talking about, when that feeling dissolves, then there's a feeling of sometimes wanting more. But it's gone, so you don't have the more. So you have to shift it to what you thought would be impossible. Kindness and love for the persons that you felt this angst with. Okay? Any more?
So this is maybe a little bit of a add-on for myself from what Suvanch's question earlier. Having to do obscuration of knowledge, and just wanted to see if I was on the right track with looking at that, because I think I sort of had that this morning a little bit. When
What's the it, Mary?
the it is the obscuration of knowledge, like
Oh,
how we
okay.
obscure knowledge,
Ah.
because, so this was my, my conceptualization,
Yep.
was that I saw that there, in a situation, well, it's saying doesn't matter what, in a situation, I had an expectation that, like, this thing always happens when we do this thing. This is just always follows that. And then the thing that always followed that was different. And it was like, oh, that can't be right. This has to be this way. And then it was like, no, that's what that was because I always thought that this thing happened. This other thing wasn't supposed to happen. And I was sort of letting myself, I guess, be confused by it when it was really, there was really nothing to be obscured. Is that, I mean, I'm not saying it very well, but that was sort of my experience of it, was like, oh, maybe that's what I was obscuring another truth because I thought this other truth had to be it. Is that more or less the right track? Yeah. Sorry to be so vague,
Yeah, I
but I
think
didn't want to
this is,
label.
we have to, it's always nice to confess. I think that we have to also acknowledge that there are a number of descriptions of what is commonly called the obscuration of knowledge. And the one that we're working with right now, just for the sake of clarity, is just one variation on that. It actually is a rather complex thing often, though I like to simplify it because I find that experientially, if I simplify things, it's easier to work with them. So, but we also need to be clear what it is that we're doing. But what you're saying seems fine. We have difficult situations where we are pained or where we have conflict with ourselves and or with others and so on. And we stop and we look into the tool bag that we call the teachings of the Dharma to find a way to extricate ourselves from a difficult situation or to find a way to help ourselves or help others. Sometimes we're doing something that you can't find in a book. but it's an inspiration from something that came from somewhere else, and so on. I think it's fairly easy if you ask the question when you're engaged in what you were just mentioning, whether or not that process was helpful, left you feeling more kindly towards yourself and others, and so on, is a pretty good test of the veracity of the approach.
Say that it definitely didn't make me feel worse. It was more like, just seeing how much my assumptions get in the way.
It's helpful to keep track of our assumptions, indeed. They do. They only get in our way when we don't see them. So seeing them is often as good as being without them. And you can't function very well without some assumptions. I assume that if I'm going to drive somewhere, I need the keys to my car. There's a ton of things where assumptions are very helpful. And then there's places where they become kind of poisonous to movement, like
I have a question. It's kind of related to, maybe partially a little bit related to your response to Sally. But when you have, some uncomfortable feelings or pain arise, and you put your awareness during your meditation. And maybe in that session, it seems like it's kind of gone, that feelings are gone. But then later on, as you said, like when you're driving a car or eating or doing something or working, all of a sudden it pops up. And I'm like, again? kind of feeling. And so it's kind of like keeps on coming back. And also, when you have a little bit like tender heart, things have started more and more like happening. It's like, maybe before you just don't feel that it was nothing, you just brushed it off, maybe whatever, some people say something or, but then you started feeling like, gosh, why, and then like so many materials that I feel like I need to work with. So in this kind of situation, what is a remedy? I mean, should I keep on putting awareness on all those feelings, like every time I practice meditation, or maybe not even like, sitting meditation, but, like when you have, during the walk, maybe 5 minutes of break, you put your awareness on, and so that eventually those are gone, those feelings.
What if you discovered that actually it's not that they're coming back, but that each time it's brand new? How would you work with that?
Well, then, like maybe start over each time.
Maybe what?
Starting over, like as if it's a new material.
Well, if it's new, then you are starting over, right?
Yeah.
Except after a point, maybe you get used to starting over. Because obviously, if what came, whatever experience you had was there, and then it wasn't there, and then you find yourself saying to yourself, oh, here's this feeling again, right?
Yeah.
But that's just you saying that to yourself. How do you know that that's coming again?
At least it looks like.
You what?
At least it looks like the same material, so.
Yeah. Well, it's the thing that's common is makiko. In other words, you're having an experience and you're recalling the experience you had before. And you're putting an equal sign between those two. So it's a better view to hold, to kind of engage in this practice, like teach yourself this thing could be really helpful, that any experience you have, any thought that you have, any emotion that you have, it's never been there before, it's brand new. So one could debate all of that and say, well, I don't know, it looks like it's new, it's not new. Just put all that aside and try to develop the ability to see each experience as new. No matter how much it resembles what was there before, you will find, I think, that actually you may just have the experience that all of your experiences, your thoughts, your feelings, your physical experience, all this, that every last one of them has never occurred before. Because there are differences between what happened before and what's happening now, and it's just an ordinary thing. But within the context of the Dharma, engaging in the practice of imagining, at least, that every experience you have is new, is fresh, leads to a certain kind of insight, or a series of insights that otherwise you don't get when we keep reminding ourselves that all of our experiences, pretty soon it's all of our experiences have happened before. This again, this again, this again. Oh, and this one is from that person again, not from that person. Whoa, and another person is giving me that same experience that person gave to so-and-so. That's totally crazy.
It is. It is.
Gee, just talking about it, you got crazy. So it's... I think that this is really, a profound thing to come to understand, that all of your experiences are continuously arising and disappearing. It's like clouds in the sky. You see a cloud in the sky, tomorrow you come out, you don't say, hey, there's that cloud again. You never do that. You understand. It's not the same one. Causes and conditions, the interdependence of things is all there coming together. So there's a cloud that kind of looks like the cloud yesterday, but so there's a feeling I have that kind of looked like a feeling I had yesterday, but let's just admit it, it's not. That one is gone. It's the nature of phenomena. It comes and goes. The interdependence is continually changing. That's easy for us to understand, that all things are arising dependent on all other things. This is not particularly Buddhist. I mean, any good scientist would say, yep, that's what happens. So all we're doing is bringing that understanding into our experience, along with everything else, and kind of viewing our experience through that lens. It's very helpful. It's very helpful. So the blame that we put on each other for doing certain things, yeah, now you're doing this to me again, right? We have to step back and think, that's just not right. There's something wrong there. Like, I may feel hurt, and somebody may be trying to hurt me, but it's not the same person or the same thing or the same feeling as I had yesterday. And that wakes us up a bit so that we begin to feel like other solutions are possible because each one is brand new. So conceptually, that's not so hard to get. Bringing it into our experience so that we begin to experience that is more difficult, but that's why we're practicing. None of us would be here if the job was done. We'd be out enjoying the sunny weather, right? Okay.
Thank you.
In the back corner.
That corner? Thanks, everybody, advocating. I don't really know if I have a question, but I just had kind of my own reflection. What you were talking about as far as feeling like, you're in a small space and can't escape a certain sensation or conflict is something that I've been working with for 7 weeks, not that anybody's counting.
Now, will you say that again? I couldn't quite hear
I
you.
said this sort of scenario is something that I've been working with for 7 weeks, not that anybody's counting.
7 weeks?
7 weeks, yeah. And I know that because I'm a full-time student, and so we have the
I see.
weeks.
So you can tell by virtue of the calendar on the wall.
Right, yeah.
I
So
see.
I'm a naturopathic student, and so this quarter I'm at school 6 days a week, and the 7th day I'm studying. So it's been, kind of like a pressure cooker. And what has become my practice is one of my classmates in particular, has been really challenging for me and very triggering in so many different ways. And it's not like the kind of thing where you see someone at the store and you either wish them well or you get mad and leave. It's like every day I'm dealing with this, all 6 days. And it's honestly been a really freeing experience to the point of bliss. Like, I don't know if I'm smiling, but it's been amazing because it's brought up so much for me. And basically, in a nutshell, this student has quite a bit of her own personal things that make it really hard to function in a pretty rigorous academic environment. She has addictive, tendencies and is in an emotionally abusive relationship. Her partner lives off of her financial aid. She is constantly smelling like cigarettes, which is really hard for me, and shows up late or sometimes doesn't show up, which as a student body is really embarrassing if we're working with patients. And kind of what I've found is that the things that bug me the most about her are a reflection of my own personal traumas or shortcomings or things that I do maybe to a lesser extent. And so every time I want to label her as something or judge her or talk about her with someone else, I'm constantly asking myself what is arising in me. And it's been really hard, especially because there's a part of me that if I see particularly a woman suffering, I want to do some sort of action. But what I feel right now is that my practice is not being mean and not in an energetic way giving her anything more to somehow feel or deal with. And to me, honestly, it's been a practice of equanimity to not act. Because sometimes I will act and hold up signs and say things or be angry about a cause that I think is important, but it's actually just, again, a sign of my own wounding. So it's been this huge experience for me to come to the place where I can hold that and not feel much of a charge and picture what kind of person she will be in the future when she's worked through this. Because in my opinion, when people have gone through a lot, they have something really specific to give to others. And so I'm like, wow, pressure cooker. But I feel actually really thankful for this, even though it's been really hard for me.
As we all know, our lives can get very complex. And commonly, the more complex things appear to us, the more uncertain and the more confused or less clear we are about what's happening. And I think any of us who have been studying and practicing the Dharma also, that can also get very complex. And to some degree we're sort of drawn towards it because there's promise in it and we want to keep learning more things. But my experience with that also is that there are times when the best approach is to simplify the practice of what we're doing in order to engage with various things. So you need an approach that you can reach for at any time, that is always helpful in some way, so that approach becomes valuable. Then if it's a good approach, it'll be valuable in many different contexts, in your relationship with different people in different situations and all. And sometimes when the situation gets complex, we try to match the complexity with our Dharma practice, which I think is a mistake. I think the complexity is better coming after we have mastered the simple. So again, like we were doing earlier this morning, the practice of shamatha, which is really the practice and skill of resting the awareness on an object. The object moves often, and our mind also moves and talks to us. You know, we talk to ourselves about what it is we're doing, and so on. The more we can simplify and get that down to just one simple process as a basis is the most helpful, best thing generally. Because what you want to do is, you're in school and you're teaching and all of these myriad things are happening. You want to get better. Most of the students want to get better at what they're doing. And of course, you don't start out studying physics with nuclear physics or with how to launch somebody to another planet. You start out with simple things, and gradually it becomes more and more complex. And in a certain way, we're just talking about the same thing. There's a lot of tools to work with, and many of them build on each other. And if you leapfrog too many, you'll end up really disappointed in the result. And possibly the worst thing that we imagine as Buddhists is you'll just abandon the path with a sort of looking over your shoulder. Well, I did that. That doesn't work. So that's my sense, is that coming at it from a kind of clear point and just expanding clarity rather than adding more is good. And I may have completely misread what you said. I'm very skilled at that. We have to come to an end here. Is this it? At least it's not a lead bell, huh? So I appreciate all of you coming, and that we had an opportunity to explore some things which each of you had some sense of exposing some part of yourself which is always feeling a little bit dangerous, a little bit risky. So I hope that nobody got hurt in that, and that it was useful. And we're going to end it now. And personally, I look forward to doing it again in the future. In the meantime, I hope you all practice well on these things so that when you come, you'll have some additional things and something to report. Okay? So back to the beginning, we will dedicate the merit and virtue of this session.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Do we have some announcements, Bill? Anything? Nothing?
The only reminder I know of right offhand, a couple. One is the young adults group, which will meet on probably this coming Friday, first Friday of the month in any case, there, and keep everybody reminded that the Mind Training Study Group continues on the 2nd and 4th Thursday evenings. And coming up the end of March, there is the 3 aspects of the path, something very close to that anyway, if I do it by memory. I think it's March 24th, and that's with Zopa. And when's your thing coming up? No idea. A little bit farther out. Okay. I live in your same boat. Could be. That seems possible. Yeah. All right.